People ask me a question all the time. They ask, why does the universe exist? Now, that's a beautiful question. A dangerous one, too. Because the moment you hear it, your brain starts itching. You want a reason, a purpose. And right away, I have to disappoint you. That's almost a funny thing, because science isn't a list of answers. It's a way of admitting ignorance without panic. When a scientist says, this is our best theory, what they really mean is, this is the best story we've got so far that hasn't been caught lying. And that's not a weakness, that's the whole strength of it. We want the universe to make sense to us. That's our first misunderstanding. Now, let me tell you a little story. A child asks, why does the ball fall when I drop it? You say, because of gravity. The child nods, then asks, why does gravity exist? Now you're in trouble. Because gravity wasn't really a why. It was a description, a rule we noticed, a pattern we wrote down. Science is excellent at answering how questions. How do planets move? How do atoms stick together? How does light travel? And we're very good at that. Shockingly good, actually. But when people ask, why does the universe exist? They're often asking a different kind of why. They're asking for meaning, not mechanism. They're asking the universe to explain itself like a character in a novel. And that's a category mistake. It's like asking, why does the number 7 want to be prime? 7 doesn't want anything. The universe doesn't either, as far as we can tell. That doesn't make it cold or empty. It just makes it honest. Human beings are incredible storytellers. We can't help it. Give us a mystery, and before the coffee gets cold, we'll have a plot, a hero, a villain, and a satisfying ending. So when we look up at the night sky, all that darkness, all those stars, it's almost irresistible to tell a story about it. A story where the universe has intentions. A story where it knows we're here. A story where everything is leading somewhere important. And usually, let's be honest, somewhere important for us. That's not stupidity. That's humanity. If you drop a child into a huge unfamiliar city, the child wants to know, who built this? Why am I here? Where is it all going? The questions are natural. They're emotional. They come from a need to feel oriented. The trouble starts when we confuse comfort with explanation. When we don't know why something exists, the temptation is to invent a reason that feels good. Something neat, something complete, something that lets us sleep better at night. But nature has a habit of refusing to cooperate with our bedtime stories. One thing that always bothered me, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, is how incredibly local many cosmic explanations are. They focus on one planet, one species, one tiny slice of time and say, yes, yes, this is the whole point. Meanwhile, the universe is doing something like this. Billions of galaxies, each with billions of stars, stretching out in every direction, and we're saying, ah, yes, clearly this is all about us. That feels a little like walking into the Library of Congress, glancing at one shelf and declaring, ah, this building exists so I can read this book. Possible? Sure. Convincing? Not very. Here's another everyday analogy. Imagine finding a beautifully complex machine, gears, wires, spinning parts, and instead of asking how it works, you immediately declare, this machine was made to make me feel important. That might be emotionally satisfying, but it doesn't actually explain the machine. Now, I want to be careful here. I'm not saying people are foolish for wanting meaning. I'm saying we should be honest about where that meaning comes from. When a story answers every question too neatly, when it leaves no room for doubt, no room for surprise, that's usually a warning sign. Real discoveries don't feel like that. Real understanding is messy, incomplete, full of loose ends. Nature doesn't say, here's the meaning. Nature says, here's what I do. Good luck. And maybe that's the point. Maybe the universe isn't a story written for us. Maybe it's a reality we're lucky enough to notice. And once you let go of the need for a perfectly comforting explanation, something interesting happens. The universe doesn't feel emptier. It feels bigger. And that, at least to me, is far more exciting than any story that ends too cleanly. One of the strangest ideas people have about science is that it's some kind of competing religion, as if scientists all got together one day and said, "All right, this is what we believe now. No arguing." That's almost funny, because science works in nearly the opposite way. Science isn't a list of answers. It's a way of admitting ignorance without panic. And that's not a weakness. That's the whole strength of it. In everyday life, we don't usually live that way. If your car starts every morning, you assume it always will. You don't wake up each day doubting the engine. And that's fine. You'd never get anywhere otherwise. But nature doesn't care about convenience. When scientists say something is true, they're always leaving the door slightly open. They're saying, if tomorrow we find better evidence, we'll change our minds. That's not indecisiveness. That's honesty. Here's a simple example. Suppose you think you know how a magic trick works. You have a theory. Then you watch it again, more carefully, and something doesn't fit. A corner of the card appears where it shouldn't. What do? If you're honest, you don't defend your theory harder. You get curious. Science is that curiosity formalized. So when people expect science to explain why the universe exists in the sense of purpose, intention, or meaning, they're asking it to do something it was never designed to do. That's like asking a thermometer why you're sad. Science can tell you how heat flows. It can't tell you why you fell in love. And that's okay. The trouble starts when people confuse uncertainty with failure. They say, well, if science doesn't know everything, why trust it at all? But that's exactly backwards. Science works because it knows it might be wrong. Every equation, every model, every explanation is written in pencil, not ink. And here's the beautiful part. That means science never closes the book. There's always another experiment, another question, another surprise waiting around the corner. If science ever said, "That's it, we're done," it would stop being science and turn into dogma. Nature doesn't hand out final answers. She hands out clues. And science is the art of following those clues without pretending they lead to a neat ending. That's why uncertainty isn't something to fear. It's the price of staying honest with the universe. And honestly, I can't think of a better deal than that. People sometimes ask me, usually with a hopeful look in their eyes, "Are you searching for the ultimate law of physics, the final answer?" They imagine that somewhere, hidden deep underneath everything, there's a single, elegant sentence that explains the whole universe. One line, no footnotes, preferably something you could engrave on a ring. Now, I understand the appeal. I really do. There's something deeply satisfying about the idea that all this, stars, atoms, thoughts, confusion, boils down to one simple principle. And I'll be honest, if we discover such a law someday, I'll be thrilled. I'll clap. I'll celebrate. I'll say, "Isn't that beautiful?" But here's the part that matters. Nature doesn't care what kind of ending we prefer. The universe is not trying to impress us with elegance. It might turn out that everything fits together perfectly, like a clever puzzle where every piece snaps into place. Or it might turn out that reality is more like an onion, layer after layer after layer, each one explaining a little, but never quite reaching a final because. And if that's the case, well, that's the case. There's nothing wrong with an onion. We get into trouble when we decide in advance what the universe ought to be like, when we say, if there's no final layer, then something is missing. But maybe nothing is missing. Here's an everyday comparison. Imagine asking, why does this song exist? You could talk about the composer, the instruments, the history of music, but at some point, the answer becomes, because someone wrote it, and here it is. There's no deeper cosmic reason hiding under the melody. The song doesn't become meaningless because of that. You can still enjoy it. The same may be true of the universe. Science keeps peeling layers because that's what curiosity does. We find patterns, then we find deeper patterns underneath. Each layer answers some questions and raises new ones. That's not failure. That's progress. The mistake is thinking that progress must end in certainty. If you insist that knowledge must terminate in a final explanation, you'll always feel frustrated, like a person flipping through a dictionary, looking for the last word that explains all the others. But if you accept that understanding might be endless, something wonderful happens. You stop rushing toward a finish line that may not exist. You start enjoying the process. The questions become as valuable as the answers, sometimes more so. And here's the quiet truth I've learned. A universe that can be completely wrapped up with a bow might actually be less interesting than one that keeps surprising us. So whether there's a final law or an infinite stack of layers, my attitude is the same. Let's keep peeling. Not because we expect the onion to end, but because each layer by itself is worth discovering. There's a funny thing about doubt. People treat it like a disease, something you should get rid of as quickly as possible. They say, "Don't you believe in anything?" as if doubt means emptiness or fear. But for me, doubt has always felt like breathing room. When you're absolutely certain, conversation stops. The book is closed. Nothing new can enter. But when you doubt, the door stays open. You're saying, "I might be wrong," and that sentence is the beginning of every discovery we've ever made. I don't doubt because I want to tear things down. I doubt because I want to understand them better. Doubt isn't a rejection of ideas. It's an invitation to test them. It's the difference between saying, "This must be true," and saying, "Let's see how well this holds up." In everyday life, doubt gets a bad reputation. If a bridge holds your car every day, you stop doubting it. That's practical. But if engineers never doubted their designs, bridges would collapse. The safety comes from the doubt, not the confidence. The same is true for ideas about the universe. Once you start asking, "How do we know this?" you notice how fragile certainty can be. Different cultures, different religions, different philosophies all claim answers. They can't all be right, but they can all be very confident. That's when doubt becomes a kind of honesty. It says, "I don't know enough to be sure." And strangely, that's comforting, because pretending to know something you don't is exhausting. I can live with uncertainty. I can live with approximate answers and probabilities and guesses that improve over time. In fact, I find that much more interesting than firm beliefs that never change. If you tell me you know exactly why the universe exists, I don't feel reassured. I feel curious about how you became so certain. Certainty, without room for doubt, often means the questioning stopped too early. The universe is under no obligation to make sense to us in final terms. It's allowed to be strange. It's allowed to surprise us. Doubt keeps us flexible enough to follow those surprises instead of explaining them away. So doubt isn't a weakness of the mind. It's a strength of character. It's the quiet courage to say, "I don't know," and still keep looking. And in a universe as vast and mysterious as this one, that might be the most honest position we can take. And maybe that's why doubt feels so human. We're not machines built to store perfect answers. We're explorers, poking around in the dark with flashlights that sometimes flicker. Doubt reminds us to keep checking the batteries, to compare notes, to laugh when we're wrong. Without doubt, curiosity dies. With it, the adventure of understanding never really ends. It gives us permission to learn, to change, to admit mistakes, and to always enjoy the mystery without fear or false certainty. There's a quiet fear hiding behind many big questions about the universe, and it usually goes something like this. If there's no built-in purpose, then what am I supposed to do? People imagine the universe as a machine that came with an instruction manual, and they're worried it's been lost. They want to know the rules, the goals, the final objective, preferably in clear language with diagrams. But here's the uncomfortable and liberating thought. There may be no instructions, and that doesn't mean we're broken or abandoned. It just means the universe isn't a classroom handing out assignments. Think about a game kids play in an empty lot. No referee, no scoreboard, no official rules posted anywhere. At first, that sounds chaotic, but what actually happens? The kids invent rules. They argue, they revise them, they adapt, the game evolves. It's not meaningless, it's alive. We often assume meaning must be handed down from something bigger than us to be real. But look at everyday life. A conversation with a friend has meaning, even though the universe didn't schedule it. Music has meaning, even though atoms don't care about melodies. Love has meaning, even though physics never mentions it. Meaning doesn't require cosmic permission. When people worry that a purposeless universe leads to despair, I suspect they're imagining purpose as something external, like a job assignment you didn't receive. But purpose isn't something you find floating in space. It's something you build, moment by moment. Here's a small example. Suppose you're fixing a leaky faucet. There's no cosmic reason that faucet exists, no grand destiny for that pipe, but the act of fixing it matters. It improves a day. It solves a problem. It connects cause and effect in a very human way. That's enough. The universe doesn't need to applaud. Another misconception is that without cosmic instructions, everything becomes arbitrary. But that's not how humans work. We still care. We still choose. We still prefer kindness over cruelty, curiosity over ignorance, honesty over pretending. Those choices don't vanish just because the universe stays silent. In fact, silence can be freeing. If the universe handed us a fixed purpose, we'd spend our lives trying not to mess it up. Instead, we get something more interesting, responsibility. We decide what matters. And here's the surprising part. A universe without instructions isn't cold. It's open. It leaves room for creativity, for disagreement, for change. It allows us to say, this matters to me, without needing cosmic approval. We're not actors following a script written before time began. We're participants in an ongoing experiment. And that might be scarier than having a rule book, but it's also far more exciting. Because when there's no pre-written meaning, every small act of understanding, every moment of curiosity, every choice to care becomes something genuinely new. Not assigned, chosen. There's an odd thing that happens as you learn more about the universe. You might expect everything to become clearer, simpler, neatly organized, like cleaning out a messy garage and finally seeing the floor. But that's not what happens. What actually happens is that the garage gets bigger. You open one door, and instead of finding answers stacked on a shelf, you find more doors. Each discovery doesn't end the mystery, it deepens it. And that used to worry people. It worried me too, once. We're taught that not knowing is a problem, something to be fixed as quickly as possible. In school, the goal is to get the right answer and move on. Uncertainty is treated like failure. But the universe doesn't work that way. The most exciting moments in science and in life are not when you say, "Ah, I know," but when you say, "That's strange." That sentence is electric. Think about everyday life. Have you ever watched steam rise from a cup of coffee and really looked at it? The twisting shapes, the way it vanishes. You can learn about molecules and heat, sure, but knowing more doesn't make it boring. It makes it richer. Now you're watching a little drama of motion and chance play out in front of you. Not knowing everything keeps that alive. If I already knew all the answers, the universe would be like a movie I'd seen too many times. Predictable, flat, finished. But the universe isn't finished, and neither are we. There's a quiet joy in saying, "I don't know," without embarrassment. It's a kind of intellectual freedom. You're no longer defending a position. You're exploring. Children understand this naturally. They ask questions without worrying how they'll look. Why is the sky blue? Why does water make circles? They don't panic when the answers are incomplete. They just keep asking. Somewhere along the way, adults forget that skill. We replace curiosity with certainty because certainty feels safer, but it's an illusion. Pretending to know things you don't doesn't make the world less mysterious. It just makes you less honest. What I love about science is that it gives you permission to live with mystery. It says, here's what we know so far, and here's where it stops. That stopping point isn't a wall. It's a frontier. And frontiers are exciting places. You don't need to solve the universe to enjoy it. You don't need a final explanation to feel awe. In fact, awe depends on not knowing everything. A sunset isn't beautiful because you understand atmospheric scattering. It's beautiful because there's always more to notice than you can hold in your head at once. The joy of not knowing is the joy of staying awake to the world. It keeps you humble. It keeps you playful. It keeps you looking. And in a universe this vast and surprising, that may be the greatest pleasure available to us, not certainty, but curiosity that never quite runs out. After all this wandering around, through questions, doubts, stories, and half-answers, we arrive back where we started. Why does the universe exist? And the most honest answer I can give is still the simplest one. I don't know. And I want to be very clear about this. That answer doesn't bother me. It doesn't make me feel lost. It doesn't make me feel cheated. It doesn't make the universe feel empty. In fact, it makes it feel more real. You see, when someone claims to know why the universe exists, they're usually offering a story that feels emotionally complete, a story with a beginning, a purpose, and a conclusion. And there's nothing wrong with stories. We need them. They help us live. But the universe isn't required to follow the structure of a good novel. It doesn't have to justify itself. As far as we can tell, the universe exists, and that's it. No instruction label, no mission statement, no explanatory footnote tucked into the fabric of space. And that's not a failure of understanding. It's an observation. When you stop demanding that the universe explain itself in human terms, something interesting happens. The question changes. Instead of, why does the universe exist? You start asking, what is it doing? And how does it behave? And what can we learn by paying closer attention? Those questions are fertile. They lead somewhere. The original why question isn't wrong. It's human. But it may not have the kind of answer we're hoping for. It may be like asking why a mountain exists. You can talk about geology, pressure, time, but at some point, the mountain just is. And that's enough. What amazes me isn't that the universe has a reason. What amazes me is that it exists at all, and that it's understandable even a little bit. That from inside this vast, ancient, indifferent cosmos, bits of matter have arranged themselves into creatures that can ask questions about it. That we can look out, measure, imagine, doubt, and wonder. That's extraordinary. So if you're waiting for the universe to tell you why it's here, you might wait a long time. But if you're willing to accept that it may never answer in that way, you gain something else. Freedom. Freedom to explore without pretending certainty. Freedom to ask better questions. Freedom to enjoy the mystery without needing to solve it. The universe doesn't give us meaning like a gift wrapped in paper, but it gives us something just as valuable, the chance to discover, to think, and to wonder. And maybe, just maybe, that's enough, not as a final answer, but as a very good place to keep going. If there's one thing I hope you take away, it's this. You don't need certainty to live a meaningful life. You don't need final answers to feel wonder. It's perfectly fine, better even, to say, I don't know, but I'd like to find out more. That attitude has taken us from cave paintings to telescopes, from fire to quantum mechanics. Not certainty, curiosity. So if the universe remains mysterious, good. That means there's more to explore. And that, to me, is not frightening at all. That's an invitation.